My girlfriend refuses to do anything with her life and just leeches off me. She wouldn't let me end things, so I had to take drastic measures to make it happen. And now, here I am, with 5 updates on how it all unfolded. About 2 years ago, she dropped out of college, and ever since, she's spiraled into someone I barely recognize. I know that sounds harsh, but I work 50 to 60 hours a week to keep us afloat because, in her words, she's too pretty to work. Just today, I walked through the door after a long shift, and there she was, still in bed, surrounded by half-eaten takeout containers. She hadn't showered, hadn't brushed her teeth, and the only time she moved all day was to answer the door for more food. After the kind of day I'd had, seeing that was the last straw. I raised my voice, telling her she couldn't keep living like this. Instead of listening, she lashed out, literally. She got physically aggressive, and that was it for me. I wanted to break up right then and there, but she guilt-tripped me, saying she had no one else to turn to. She stayed curled up in bed the rest of the day, and a few hours later, I went back into the room and told her straight, I can't do this anymore. I don't care who she leans on, but for the sake of my own sanity, I can't be with her. She tried the guilt-tripping again, but when she realized it wasn't working, she jumped out of bed, ran to the kitchen, grabbed a pair of scissors, and threatened to end it all. I wasn't about to call her bluff. I told her I'd stay. Now she's asleep, and I've made up my mind, I'm breaking up with her tomorrow. If she threatens it again and actually goes through with it, that's not on me. I just don't care anymore. Update 1, last night, when we were getting ready for bed, I didn't even bother changing clothes. I just stood there and told her we needed to talk. At first, she was goofing off, bouncing on the bed like I wasn't serious, but eventually, she caught on. I laid it all out. I told her I've been patient for years, waiting for her to get a job, go back to school, or even just pick up a hobby, something. But nothing ever changed, and I don't know how much longer I can wait. I told her it eats at me, how little she cares about herself, how she has no goals, no direction. For the first time in a long time, she actually listened. That alone caught me off guard. And then, to my surprise, she started agreeing with me. She even threw out ideas on where she could apply, what classes she might take, and she said I could watch her submit applications to prove she wasn't lying. I couldn't believe it. It was like, in her mind, I was still willing to make this work. And I won't lie, a part of me thought, maybe this is it, maybe she'll finally change. But that only made what I had to say next even harder. I started by telling her I didn't love her the same way anymore, and as the conversation went on, I admitted the truth, I don't feel anything for this relationship at all. I'm numb to it. I want to be with someone who has ambition, someone who actually wants more out of life. That's when she broke down, asking why I never said anything sooner. I told her I've always tried, I've asked her to cook, to go out and try new things with me, to go back to school. I even offered to pay for her classes. Anything to get her moving. She said she understood all that, but she was hurt that I never told her it was making me lose interest. From her perspective, she thought I still loved her just the same. She kept apologizing, saying she wasn't in the right headspace, that she had no motivation for anything, no hobbies, no real interests. The only thing she cared about was spending time with me, that was the only part of her day she looked forward to. I didn't feel much hearing that, except uncomfortable. I tried to tell her that maybe she'd be happier with someone else, but she panicked and cut me off. She apologized again, said she'd be better, that she'd go out with me tomorrow and start looking for classes in August. She swore she didn't want to lose me, that she hated knowing I didn't love her anymore. She cried so much I had to tell her we'd talk again once she calmed down. An hour later, we picked it back up, and she begged me for 2 months, just 2 months to prove she could change. Again, she listed all the places she'd apply to, promised she'd be a better girlfriend. I never wanted to make her homeless, so I figured this was a fair compromise, even though I had my doubts. But when I mentioned wanting to see other people, that's where she drew the line. She was way more fixated on that than the whole getting her life together thing. She kept pressing me, asking what she could do to make me love her again, saying the worst part of all this was losing the only person she had. She was on the verge of another breakdown, so I told her fine, we'd see where things stood in a month. In my mind, If she was serious about getting back on her feet in 2 months, then by the halfway mark, she'd already be on the right track. And honestly, I just didn't want to deal with another full-blown meltdown while I was still living with her. I slept on the couch last night, and I'll probably keep doing that for a while. Around 3 a.m., she came out, wanting to talk again, but I told her I was exhausted and we'd handle it tomorrow. She didn't argue. Instead, she lay down on the floor beside me, crying and apologizing over and over. When I finally told her to stop, she whispered "okay" and sobbed under her blanket until she fell asleep. And that's where things stand right now. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I don't regret it. Letting it all out has made me feel so much lighter. I have no idea what things will look like in 2 months, but one thing's for sure, I'm not moving the deadline. Last night, she told me about something she saw on TikTok, some kind of trend where couples set a timer on their phone and take turns airing out what's been bothering them. She wanted to try it, but I told her straight up that it was a dumb idea. If we were actually going to talk about our issues, the last thing we needed was some arbitrary time limit cutting us off. After some back and forth, she agreed and let me go first. Her opening question caught me off guard. She wanted to know the exact moment I completely lost my love for her. Like I'd said before, it wasn't just one thing. It was this slow, grinding feeling that built up over time until there was nothing left. I told her that. Then she asked when I had felt the most angry. I told her I'd need a moment to think, and she said that was fine. A few minutes passed, and then something finally clicked. At first, I struggled to find the right words, but once I started, it all just came pouring out. I told her the worst time, the time when I felt the angriest, was when I had just started working at the hospital. That period was brutal. Non-stop work, barely any downtime. I was constantly learning things that school had never prepared me for, but at the same time, I was expected to perform like a seasoned professional. Without a doubt, it was the most stressed I had ever been. Any nurse could probably relate. That year completely reshaped the way I think. It taught me that hard work does pay off, but only if you have the drive and passion to push through. And that's when things started going downhill for me emotionally. Coming home to see her doing absolutely nothing day after day, no job, no meals made, no effort to learn or grow, while I was pushing myself to the limit. That was rough. I'd even suggested jobs that had flexible schedules, or going back to school for something that might be a better fit for her. Every single time, she shot it down. After a while, it stopped just frustrating me, it disgusted me. She asked why I hadn't made a bigger deal out of it back then, why I hadn't just told her how I felt. I told her there are some things that shouldn't need to be said. I shouldn't have to remind a grown woman to take care of herself, to eat, to do something other than scroll mindlessly through her phone for hours on end. And after coming home from a grueling shift at the hospital, the last thing I wanted was to waste my energy begging my girlfriend to be productive. So, I just swallowed it. Told myself that at least she was still kind, still caring. But the resentment only got worse. And I won't sugarcoat it, I know that's when I started becoming meaner toward her. I regret it now, but it happened. I also told her that when she dropped out of nursing school, it hurt. Not because I expected her to follow in my footsteps, but because I knew she was capable of doing it. Over time, though, I started to realize that with the way she was, she probably never would have made it through. That's why I suggested other paths, less demanding careers, easier majors. Hell, I would have been happy if she had just found a hobby she genuinely cared about. But she chose to do nothing. For years. And that's why, little by little, my feelings for her faded. She asked if I hated her. I told her I didn't know. She was loving, she was kind, but I hated the way she handled her life. And now that everything was out in the open, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel much of anything at all. I was just done. During the whole conversation, we kept eye contact. A few times, it looked like she might break, but she held herself together like she said she would. When I finished, I told her she could say whatever she needed to now. But instead of responding, she asked if we could continue later. Then she locked herself in our room for the rest of the day. The next day, we sat down again to finish talking. She told me she thought she might be depressed. She said she hadn't felt sad before, but she had zero motivation to do anything. A few people had messaged me, telling me to ask if she'd ever considered getting tested for ADHD. When I brought it up, though, she shut it down immediately. She wanted no part of it. I knew she hated hospitals and needles, but her flat-out refusal caught me off guard, especially since I had explained that ADHD testing wasn't anything like a typical hospital visit. Then she asked me if things could change, if she actually put in the effort to turn things around, would I be willing to give her another chance? I told her I didn't know. Right now, I felt nothing, and I had no idea if that would ever change. And the fact that it took me hitting my breaking point for her to even consider doing something different? That didn't sit right with me. She wanted a compromise, so I told her the only one I could offer, I'd give it a month. If, by then, I felt like there was enough of a reason to stay, then I would. But I made it clear, there were no guarantees. My feelings might not come back, no matter what she did. All I could promise was that I would match the effort she put in. She didn't like that answer, but I wasn't going to lie to her. Then she handed me a piece of paper. It was a list of hobbies and interests she had written down, things she wanted to explore. The two biggest ones were photography and cooking. She also showed me her phone, proving that she had started applying for entry-level jobs on Indeed and Glassdoor. I told her straight, I didn't care if she worked, as long as she actually showed passion for something, anything. But if she ended up doing nothing, then yeah, she needed to find a job. Especially if she planned on moving out. A few people had also asked if I had anyone I could talk to about all of this. Truth is, I do. 2 of my co-workers, both women, know about the situation. We work long shifts together, and I trust them completely. They're both incredibly level-headed, and they told me exactly what they think, that this is just temporary, that I'm going to get love-bombed, and if I'm not careful, everything will go right back to how it was before. And honestly, I think they're right. That's why, no matter what happens, I have to stand firm. My friends have been incredibly supportive, even going so far as to offer me a place to stay for a few nights. Their reasoning was simple, they believed that if I stayed near her, I would eventually fall for her manipulation. While I appreciated the gesture, it did not sit right with me. Technically, I was still in a relationship, and moving out, even temporarily, felt like crossing a line. Still, I told them I would keep the option open if things got worse. I have always considered them to be reasonable people, so I try to take their advice seriously. Despite the many messages I have received, both in private and in public, warning me that I am making a mistake, I feel compelled to give this one last shot. Even so, I remain emotionally closed off, guarded, and indifferent about our situation. Many of you have told me that things could change over time if both of us put in the effort. I also took the advice of those who suggested cutting off intimacy. That was my plan from the start, so I have continued sleeping in the living room. However, every single night, she has been lying on the floor right below me. Even when I have told her that I need space to process my thoughts, she insists that she will not accept that. Update 3. Last week, my girlfriend was incredibly proactive. It was as if she had a sudden surge of energy, throwing herself into all sorts of hobbies that she thought might bring her joy. I kept my word to meet her halfway and did my best to support her. Out of everything she tried, the only interest that really stuck was photography. She has accumulated a collection of clothes over the years and ended up selling some on Depop to afford a Canon 250D camera, which she said was a great choice for a beginner. She has done far more research on it than I have. I strongly suspect that she chose this hobby because it gave her an excuse to spend more time with me. She constantly asked me to go out into the city with her to take pictures and test her camera. Since I had promised to match her energy and did not want to go back on my word, I agreed, even after exhausting shifts at the hospital. There was a noticeable shift in her behavior, though. She had always been affectionate, but during that first week, it was turned up to the maximum. She would ask me multiple times a day how I was feeling, whether I was upset, and what I wanted to do for the rest of the day. She was constantly trying to gauge my mood. When we went out, the public displays of affection were non-stop. She wanted to kiss, hold hands, and extend our outings as late as possible, even when I reminded her that I had to be up early for work. It is difficult to put into words exactly what was happening. I do not know if it could be classified as love bombing, but with the sheer amount of energy she was putting into all of this, I fully expected it to come crashing down in the second week. There is only so much I can handle before I need a break, especially given everything that had already happened. The only other people I have really spoken to about this are my co-workers, and they have warned me that this is classic love bombing, just as they predicted. They keep asking me what I plan to do if I find myself stuck in this situation for longer than 2 months. I told them that my lease would be ending soon, which has been a source of relief. If this relationship truly does not improve, I will be able to move out, though I plan to give her enough time to prepare. They also pointed out that I have been showing up to work looking more exhausted than usual. It was becoming noticeable. I assured them that I was fine, but over the weekend, they insisted that I come out with them to unwind. They said that isolating myself in my apartment would only make things worse for my mental and emotional health. I initially declined, but when they asked me again on the day of, I changed my mind. I spent most of the day with them, and honestly, it did wonders for my mood. Of course, my girlfriend wanted to know where I had been all day. I told her I was out with friends. She was disappointed that we had not spent the day together, but I reassured her that we would make up for it by spending the entire next day together. I continue to receive messages insisting that I should cut off my friends entirely because they are manipulating me. But believe what you will, I know they are good people who genuinely care about me. They were a big part of the reason I quit smoking this year. Though it has made me more anxious at times, it has significantly improved my health. There is a unique kind of bond that forms between people in our work environment, and I trust my coworkers with my life. Update 4. I knew the emotional crash was coming, and I was right. It was messy, loud, and, in some ways, could have been avoided. When I posted my last update, I was not in the best mental space, but reflecting on everything and writing it down helped calm me. I am a little embarrassed to admit it, but I did start smoking again, just a little. But honestly, it helped stabilize my mind when I was on the verge of a breakdown. Without my friends, I would not have had much else to turn to. This breakdown was something I could not share with them. I did not want them to intervene. It all started when we were out in the city, and my girlfriend seemed to be in a bad mood. Later, when we got home, she accused me of being dismissive and asked if I was angry with her. Wanting to communicate better, I told her the truth. I was feeling uncomfortable with her constant need for affirmation and affection. It never stopped. On top of that, she was still sleeping in the living room at night, meaning I had zero time alone to myself, even at home. After so many outings, I was physically and emotionally drained. Truthfully, exhaustion was my biggest issue, and according to both my coworkers and my girlfriend, it was written all over my face. She took my words hard. She barely spoke to me for the rest of the day, and by the next day, her mood had only gotten worse. Maybe I should have apologized or found a way to communicate better at that moment. Maybe that was the tipping point, the moment where everything could have gone differently. But instead, I used that time to take a nap and be alone for a bit, something I had barely had the chance to do for over a week. Then came the third day. A lot happened on this particular day, and a lot was said. This was the moment where everything reached a breaking point, leading to more problems over the following week. I will try to recall everything as clearly as possible, from the moment I woke up to the end of the day. That morning, I left the apartment without saying goodbye or even speaking to my girlfriend, as I was nearly running late for work. Normally, I at least check in on her before heading out, but she had been staying in our bedroom for the past few days, ever since her mood had taken a downturn. My own mood, however, was better than usual. I felt well rested, had spent some much-needed time alone, and was simply enjoying my shift at the hospital, something that did not happen very often. After work, my co-workers invited me to grab a meal with them. I had been turning down these invitations for weeks, but that day, I finally decided to join them. I ended up getting home late, probably around 9 or later, and I had a few drinks. This is the part where writing gets difficult, and where I usually stop reflecting on the events of that night. When I walked into the apartment, my girlfriend was sitting in the living room, staring directly at me. She did not say a word. It startled me because she was neither on her phone nor watching television, just sitting there, as if she had been staring at the wall until the moment I walked in. I asked her what she was doing, and she immediately responded by asking where I had been. I told her I had been out with friends. She pressed further, specifically asking if I had been with my co-workers. She knew that I mostly worked with women and had heard me mention my friends before our relationship started falling apart. I confirmed that, yes, I had been with them, and that we had gone out to eat. Then she asked if I had been drinking. I did not know if it was obvious or if she was just fishing for information, but I answered truthfully and told her I had. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, one that felt much longer than it probably was. Finally, she brought up the deadline I had set for myself, whether or not my feelings for her would change within a month. She asked if they had. The question caught me off guard, and I took a moment before answering. I told her I appreciated the effort she had been making, but I was still unsure about our future together and could not give her a definitive answer. She then accused me of being dismissive, saying she felt I was not putting in the same effort to repair our relationship. That confused me. I reminded her that I had been going out with her whenever she asked and that I had matched her energy in trying new hobbies. To me, it just felt like she was grasping for reasons to be upset. At that point, her voice started to shake, and I could tell she was struggling to keep her emotions in check. She asked if I realized that I was not smiling when we went out together, that I was quiet, and that I barely talked. I reminded her that she already knew how I felt, so none of that should have come as a surprise. I also explained that my silence was mostly due to exhaustion from work, but she did not seem to believe me. She told me she was constantly overanalyzing my emotions, knowing now that I had lost feelings for her, and she had no idea what else she could do to make me care again. I repeated what I had told her before: she needed to focus on something, anything, that would get her out of bed and give her life some purpose. She countered that it had already been 2 weeks, and she had been as active as she possibly could, even to the point of mentally exhausting herself, but my mood had not improved. She was starting to believe that no matter how much effort she put in, nothing would change by the end of the month. And then, she completely broke down. Through sobs and a trembling voice, she told me how much she loved me, how much affection she had poured into our relationship, only for me to throw it away over what she saw as a flimsy excuse, like I had just been looking for a reason to leave. She questioned whether I had ever truly loved her at all. She told me that, despite how much pain she was in, despite how betrayed she felt, she still loved me and wanted us to stay together. She said that if I left, she would have nothing, no one, no place to go, no future. She told me she would lose the will to live and that she had no idea what she would do without me. I wish I could put into words just how devastating this moment was. There were points where she was practically screaming through her tears, completely breaking down in front of me. I had never seen her like that before, and I just froze. I had no idea how to react. She kept saying over and over that if this was really the end, then nothing else mattered. No job, no extra month to try and fix things, because she already knew I would not change my mind. And after all of that, she locked herself in our bedroom again. She stayed there for days. Every time I tried to knock and talk to her, she would scream at me to go away, so I did. After a few days, she calmed down enough for us to have a conversation. Her entire attitude had shifted. She was still upset, but she was extremely apologetic, telling me that a lot of what she had said was in the heat of the moment and that she did not mean it. The time I had spent alone, without her or even my friends, gave me the clarity to finally do what I should have done a month ago. I sat her down and, as gently and calmly as I could, told her that it was over. There was no chance of us fixing this, and I no longer wanted to be in a relationship. I told her I would let her stay for 2 more months so she could find a job and start getting back on her feet. But I also made it clear that if she had not made any progress by then, I would be the one leaving. She started crying again, but this time, it was different, less desperate, more resigned. But she agreed to the terms, and just like that, it was done. About a week later, she managed to get a job at a supermarket, though only part-time since that was all they were offering. After our final confrontation, our communication became almost non-existent. When she was not at work, she would shut herself in her room, spending entire days and nights alone. I had gotten used to sleeping on the couch by then, so it did not bother me much anymore. And as selfish as it might sound, there was a part of me that felt strangely liberated. I did not tell my co-workers about the breakup when it happened, just vaguely mentioned that we were trying to work things out. But in reality, I found myself going out with them more often after work, because being in the apartment felt suffocating and miserable. For the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of happiness. But that feeling did not last. The following week, everything came crashing down when I came down with pneumonia. At first, I thought it was just a mild cold, but one day it hit me like a freight train. My lungs felt like they were barely working, and I was coughing so much that breathing became a struggle. I had to take 2 weeks off work to recover. Even now, as I write this, most of my symptoms are gone, but I still rely on an inhaler to help me breathe sometimes. During those 2 weeks, I spent most of my time asleep, sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day. When I was awake, I barely had the energy to do anything but lie there. When I told her I was sick and she saw how bad it was, she offered me the bedroom again. I refused, insisting I was fine. She was still working part-time, which meant she spent a lot of time at home. At first, she kept her distance. But by the middle of that first week, she started checking in on me, asking if I needed anything to eat or how I was feeling. I hated that being sick forced us to interact. Not because I was angry with her, but because it felt awkward. Just days after breaking up, I suddenly had to rely on her for help. I could not even go out to buy groceries, so since she worked at a supermarket, she insisted on picking up food for me. When I handed her my card, she refused to take it and said she would cover it herself. For the most part, I lived on fruit and cookies, but she scolded me about needing proper meals. So, despite my protests, she started cooking for me. At first, she would just check on me and then go back to her room. But during the second week, she began sitting with me while I was awake, talking about her day at work, her coworkers, and little things that had been on her mind. It felt like she had been holding in so much that she had wanted to say but never got the chance. And once she started talking, she did not stop. Strangely enough, I found comfort in listening to her. It felt different, more natural, less strained. Before long, we were watching television together at night when I could not sleep. Then, those moments turned into deeper conversations, the kind we had not had in years. There was no yelling, no tension, just honesty. It reminded me of how we used to talk when we were just friends. During the second week, I had one particularly bad day where I felt awful, too exhausted to do anything, yet unable to sleep because I could not stop coughing. She skipped work to stay with me. We did not talk much, but she made sure I ate and drank water. Those 2 weeks left me with a lot to think about. Since recovering, I have made an effort to talk to her more, but without forcing anything. Just casual conversations about her photography, her job, and whatever else came up. She started spending less time in her room and more time in the living room with me, sharing stories about her day. Over time, it became clear that our transition from a couple to friends was actually happening. It felt more natural, easier to communicate. But even with that, there was still something between us, something unspoken, a wall built by our final argument. I could not quite put it into words, but I knew it was there. I had given myself until the end of September to move out, as that was when my lease expired. And as the days passed, that deadline crept up on me. When the end of the month finally arrived, I made the decision to renew my lease somewhere else. I needed a fresh start, away from the memories of our relationship. No matter how much I appreciated the connection we had rekindled during my recovery, I knew staying was not an option. On the last Saturday of the month, I told her I was leaving. I explained that I needed to focus on myself, to move forward. As I spoke, I watched her expression shift. Then, she started to cry. The argument erupted almost instantly. She accused me of abandoning her, of throwing everything away for no reason. She could not understand why I would leave when we had been getting along again. I tried to stay calm, to explain that I was not leaving to hurt her, but because I needed to take care of myself. But her words stung. As the fight escalated, she became more upset, frantic, even. I saw something in her eyes shift, something I had never seen before. And then, before I could react, she lunged at me. I did not see it coming. One moment, we were arguing, and the next, she struck me across the face. I stumbled back, stunned. The room went silent. Her expression changed instantly, from anger to sheer panic. She started to apologize, but I barely heard her. My face stung, but more than that, I felt betrayed. I left the room, needing to clear my head, my heart pounding as adrenaline surged through me. I had no idea what to do next. My mind was racing, and sitting in that apartment felt unbearable. After a few minutes of staring at the walls, I decided to get out, to clear my head. Without a real destination in mind, I got in my car and just drove, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on me like a heavy fog. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a nearby hospital. I had called a friend, and they insisted I should get checked out, just to be safe. Sitting in the waiting room, I felt a mix of embarrassment and confusion. I did not want to make a scene, but deep down, I knew I needed to be there. The doctors saw me quickly. After a brief examination, they assured me I was physically fine, but they urged me to take a step back and process everything that had unfolded. So I stayed there for a while, mostly just sitting in silence, letting it all sink in. And for the first time, the reality of our situation became painfully clear. When I was finally discharged, I sat in my car for a moment, trying to piece together my emotions. I felt anger, sadness, and, somehow, a strange sense of relief. I knew I needed to reach out to her, just once more. I sent her a message. I told her I would not be pressing charges. I did not want to drag this out any longer, but I needed to be firm. I made it clear that I never wanted to see or hear from her again. I also reminded her that she still had a way out, a chance to turn things around, but that was up to her now. I was done. There was nothing left to say. The moment I hit send, a wave of calm settled over me. It was over. The next morning, I packed up my things and left. I walked out of that place, leaving behind the memories, the arguments, and whatever love had once been there. I did not look back as I closed the door for the last time. It was time to start over, somewhere far away from everything that had been holding me down.